Hello, YouTube subscribers, or anyone who might be watching this sometime in the future on whatever platform you may be on. This is Matt here from thevirtualinstructor.com, and I'd like to share with you something a little secret today. Not really secret, but just a special little glimpse inside of the membership section at thevirtualinstructor.com. It's been a little bit of time since I've been able to share some free content with my YouTube subscribers, and I want to give you something for just being a YouTube subscriber. And like I said, if you're watching this on another platform, that's great too. You're going to get a glimpse at this as well. Today I want to share with you a recorded live lesson from the membership section. Each week, members are able to tune in and as I stream a live video demonstration, a live video lesson from my studio in my home to your house for an hour each week. This week, I'd like to share with you a recorded lesson that took place several weeks ago, and this one's on one-point perspective. And one-point perspective is a very basic, fundamental part of creating the illusion of space in a drawing, yet there are many artists that still don't have a real strong grasp on that. This, of course, was a member-requested video, which most of the videos that I do during the live lessons are member requested. Members, of course, can chat, they can ask questions and make comments during the demonstration. As I see those questions, I answer them live to the best of my ability. Many of you are already members, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate your membership and just the community that you guys have created over at thevirtualinstructor.com. Like I said, it's been a while since I've been able to share any free content, so I want to share this video with you. The reason why it's been a while is because I've been hard at work developing courses and adding ebooks and just making the overall experience at thevirtualinstructor.com a little bit better, a little easier to navigate, move around, and making the site look a little bit better as well. So I hope you'll take a look at this. Oh, by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube and you're not already a subscriber, you can become a subscriber by just clicking on this button right here. Or if you're not already a member and you want to go ahead and become a member and gain access to the great video courses, the ebooks, the live lessons that happen each week, and the ultimate lesson plan, as well as the ability to download over 300 videos that exist on the site currently. You can just click on this button right here and it will take you to the page where you can learn how to become a member. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this free preview, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's live lesson. I'm Matt, and I'd like to welcome you to not officially the 75th live lesson. That was actually last week. I went back and recounted, and we're already beyond the 75th live lesson. I wanted it to be somewhat of a little bit of a celebration, but we actually missed it. So we'll just say this is our 75th live lesson, even though it's really the 76th live lesson. I'd like to welcome you again. Tonight is going to be somewhat of a beginner's lesson, but it's also good for intermediate and advanced artists really to brush up on perspective, which is what we're going to be talking about tonight. Specifically, we're going to be talking about linear perspective, and we're going to start with one-point perspective. This is going to be a series of live lessons. Tonight we're going to do one-point perspective. Next week we'll do two-point perspective. We'll see how far we get with two-point perspective. We might have a third live lesson episode where we talk about three-point perspective. Linear perspective was developed, or actually maybe possibly rediscovered, by Filippo Brunelleschi, who was an Italian architect at around 400 or 1420 when it was possibly rediscovered. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're not going to be using a photo reference. We're going to be drawing completely from imagination because we are using a drawing device, linear perspective, to do so. But during the course of tonight's live lesson, I'd like to remind you that there is a chat box over here to the side, and if you have any questions, now is the time to ask them. There are other resources on the site available that discuss perspective in detail, but tonight's a good opportunity to ask questions that you may have regarding one-point perspective as they come up. There's also a link to a video down below. Now, this video talks about Brunelleschi's experiment that helped him discover one-point perspective. And it's quite an interesting video. It's very interesting the way he discovered one-point perspective. He basically did a painting. He put that painting on a mirror, and also, or actually, he did the painting, drilled a hole in the painting, and held it up with a mirror in front of it, and then used the mirror to make comparisons between the painting and the actual building that he was drawing. And me sitting here explaining it is not going to do a very clear, a very good job of describing that process. So I've left a link for you in the video below. Before we get into the drawing part of things, I want to go through the process that we're going to be dealing with this evening, kind of a quick overview of using one-point perspective. So we're going to look at a series of images here. Basically, when you are drawing with one-point perspective, there are several components that are very important. The first component is the horizon line. Now, the horizon line, we all know, is technically where the horizon line is the line that potentially, I'm trying to explain things and talk at the same time. The horizon line is the line that divides the ground from the sky. But the horizon line is dependent on the viewer's vantage point. So in other words, if you're looking off in the distance, you might see the sky and the ground, and that line might actually be the horizon line. But if you change your vantage point, or the level at which your eyes are at, if you look up, for example, your vantage point is going to obviously change, and technically that horizon follows you up. But for purposes tonight, let's just say that the horizon line divides the sky from the ground. Now, the horizon line goes on forever, so we might end it on our picture plane, but technically it goes off the picture plane to the right all the way for eternity, and it goes off the picture plane on the left in the same fashion. So that means that, just keep that in mind, because that's important when we talk about the next thing that you put on the vanishing point, or on the horizon line, and that would be the vanishing point. Now, a vanishing point is the point placed on the horizon line where objects begin to disappear because of distance. Now, this vanishing point has got to be placed on the horizon line. Now, going back to the fact that the horizon line goes on forever off the right side or left side of our picture plane, or the horizon line could be completely off our picture plane altogether, it makes sense to understand that the vanishing point could possibly be off of your picture plane. For what we're going to do tonight, we're actually going to have the vanishing point inside of the picture plane. But just know that it's possible that the vanishing point is off the surface of the paper. Now, after we establish a horizon line and a vanishing point, for one-point perspective, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw the shape of the object. Now, we're going to begin tonight by just drawing basically a cube, and then we're going to turn that cube into a building or two and maybe fill in the image so that it looks like maybe a little bit of a city. But the next step here is to draw the basic shape. Now, in this case, the cube has 4 corners. So from each one of the 4 corners, we are going to draw a line from one of those corners back to the vanishing point. So that's kind of what it looks like here. If we take a line from each one of those 4 corners and draw it back to the vanishing point, that's the next thing we're going to do. And if you kind of look at it, you can kind of tell it looks like maybe a cube or a rectangular prism that goes off in space forever. So in the next step, we're actually going to figure out the endpoints of that cube. And this is the step that's tricky. And what you're going to do basically is you're going to draw a smaller square that touches all 4 corners of the lines of perspective that go back. So each one of the lines that we just established that go back to the vanishing point, you're going to use those lines as a guide to create a smaller square, basically a place where the cube ends. Okay, so just to back up, we established the horizon line first. We place a vanishing point on the horizon line. Then you draw the shape of the object. In this case, since we're doing a cube, the shape would be a square. Then lines from all 4 corners of that square back to the vanishing point. Then we use those lines to draw another square, a smaller square, that touches each one of those lines that we drew at the corner. Now, our cube is actually there. The only thing we need to do is to erase any of the lines that we no longer need, and here we have a transparent cube. Now, some of you may have learned how to do perspective, or maybe a pseudo perspective, by drawing a square and then drawing another square on top of it, and then connecting the lines. That's not really totally one-point perspective, because you'll notice the smaller square is actually smaller. If you draw it the other way, as I was explaining, then the squares are exactly the same size. It does create some illusion of space or depth, but it's not totally accurate. So what we're going to do next is we're going to add some areas of shadow or value on the object, a highlight, a core shadow, and maybe a midtone, and then we could possibly put some cast shadows there at the end of the drawing. So not only do we create the illusion of space, but we also create the illusion of form. So that's basically the process that we're going to go through tonight, and this is what we need to keep in mind as we are working this evening. So let's go ahead and switch over to the main camera and take a look at the materials we're going to be using tonight. They're not fancy. We're just kind of going back to good old basic drawing tools here this evening. I'm going to be using just a regular old graphite pencil. This pencil is actually a little bit softer than a number 2 or an HB pencil, so the lines are going to be a little bit darker. Now, the reason why I'm using this pencil tonight is so that you can clearly see the marks that I'm making in the feed. If I was using an HB pencil, it might be hard to show up. So in your case, if you're doing this along with me, an HB pencil is perfectly acceptable. What I would steer away from is maybe a softer graphite pencil like a 4B or 5B, because we're going to be doing some erasing this evening, and an eraser, it's going to be very hard to erase some of those softer marks that are made by, harder marks that are made by softer graphite. I also have a vinyl eraser that I'm going to be using, not a clean vinyl eraser, but it still do its job. And I also have a ruler to keep a straight line. If you don't have a ruler, that's fine. You can use anything that's straight on the edge to accomplish this. Tonight I'm going to be working on Bristol paper, but of course regular old drawing paper will work just fine. While we're on the topic here real quickly, I know there's a lot of discussion going on right now on the forum on paper, and I have noticed that. I haven't had a chance to address that, but I know a lot of you have questions about paper. I am planning on addressing that. So the first thing we want to do is we want to establish the horizon line. So remember, the horizon line is, in our case, it will be what the line that divides the sky from the ground. But just keep in mind that the horizon line can change and vary depending on the vantage point of the viewer. So I'm just going to go ahead and take a line straight across and define the horizon line. Now the horizon line, remember, goes on forever, so it goes off the paper on this side and it goes off the paper on that side. So theoretically, I could put a vanishing point off of the paper, just as long as it is on the horizon line. You can't just throw a vanishing point here and there. It needs to be on the horizon line. So that's the next thing we need to do, is place a vanishing point here. And if it helps, you might put it right in the middle, but for tonight's demonstration, I'm going to put it off to the left a little bit and not have it directly centered in the middle of our composition. So horizon line, vanishing point, and I'm making this vanishing point a little bit larger than I normally would, just so it's a little bit easier to see. Now the next step is we are going to draw the basic shape of the object that we're going to draw. We're going to start with just some basic buildings. So I'm going to draw basically just a rectangle here. And for this first building, I'm going to draw it below the horizon line. So I'm going to start by just drawing a rectangle below the horizon line. It looks like Michael has possibly shared a little bit of a resource here. Thank you, Michael, for that. The Manga Studio 5 app has digital vanishing points that can be adjusted way off the page. That's pretty cool. So there we go. I hope that's dark enough for you to see. There, the the rectangle that we have created. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to draw lines from all four corners of this rectangle back to the vanishing point. So we'll start down here at the corner. And then we'll go right up here from this corner. Now, of the different forms of perspective, 1-point perspective, linear perspective, I should say, 1-point perspective, 2-point perspective, and 3-point perspective, it is my opinion that 1-point perspective is actually second in terms of difficulty. I think 2-point perspective is a little bit easier than 1-point perspective. And I should probably bring that line all the way back down here since we are doing this the proper way there. Now, I also have a drafting brush, so every once in a while if you see me sweep away some pieces of graphite or try to clean up the surface a little bit, that's what that is. All right, now that we've got our lines of perspective that go back to the vanishing point, the next thing we need to do is the tricky part, and that is to draw the smaller square or the smaller rectangle that's further off in the distance, closer to the vanishing point. Now, a lot of people will draw this rectangle or square and they just don't get that line to meet up with the corners. So we want to make sure that our square touches all four of those lines at the corners. Now, to ensure that this happens, what I like to do is I'll start at one of the corners and I'll just work my way back with my pencil and decide where I want the building to end. And let's say I want it to end right here. So initially I will start at this corner, touching this line, and then the next thing I need to do is simply just draw a line straight down until it touches the very bottom line right here. So again, I went from this corner and I just worked my way down and I decided this is where my building is going to end, and I'm going to draw a line straight down from there with the ruler. Now I'm going to take this bottom corner and go straight across on the other side. Now I want it to be parallel with my original line, so I'm actually going to move the ruler up so that I can see what I'm actually drawing here. And then I'll go over until I touch this line. Now I can just simply go straight up from there and touch this line at the top. And then I can connect that corner with my original corner, and then we've created the smaller rectangle inside of those lines of perspective that go back. Now, the last thing we need to do is just simply erase the lines that we no longer need. And since we're going to create an opaque building, not a glass cube, I'm going to go over the lines that we are going to keep here and make them a little bit darker so it's easier for you to see before I erase them. So we're going to keep the lines that define the edge or the side of the form here, which I guess would be a rectangular prism, which will be a building. So if I refer to it as a building instead of a rectangular prism, I hope you'll forgive me for that. So all of these lines here that define the left side. We'll need to keep all the lines that exist on the inside part of the front of our building or rectangular prism. Now I'm working with a stainless steel ruler here this evening, but if it helps you, you might try a transparent ruler. They make those, and it really helps you to see the lines through the ruler, obviously. All right, now we're going to need to keep all these lines in this area on the top too, so I'll make those just a little bit darker as well. All right, now I'm going to erase the lines that we no longer need. And we won't need anything on the inside of this cube here, or the front of the rectangle, I should say. So we're going to erase those lines, and I'm going to leave just a little bit of residue of those lines here so you can kind of still see where they were. We're not going to need anything on the top of this box here, and we won't need anything over here on the side. So we can erase all of these lines as well. So, you know, like I said, what we're doing this evening is definitely basic, but basics are important. And if it's something that you haven't been exposed to before, or something that's been a while that you've been exposed to, it's definitely important to revisit that, have a strong grasp and understanding of how to use this device if it ever needs to be a part of your drawings or paintings. All right, now we're not going to need any of these lines that go back to the vanishing point either. So we'll go ahead and erase those lines. And right from the start, I made those pretty light anyway, knowing that I was going to need to erase them. And as you become more experienced with this process, of course, you can do the same. All right, so we've got the beginnings of our building here. We've at least got the form of the object planned out. All right, the next thing that we're going to do here is before we start adding some details to this building, I want to make sure that I get through everything that I wanted to cover tonight before I start, adding value and adding details here. So let's add another cube here, or another rectangular prism that will eventually become a building. This time, let's add it on the left side of the vanishing point. So we're going to go through the same process, except it's going to be on the other side of the vanishing point, and you can kind of see how that will affect the drawing. So again, we've already established our horizon line and our vanishing point, so all we need to do is draw the shape of our building here. So again, this will be kind of a rectangular shape. Now, as you're working here, it's crucial that some of your lines are parallel to other lines in the image so it makes sense. And what I'm referring to is this line over here. We want to make sure that it's parallel over there. You don't want to have lines that are kind of going at some diagonals that don't really make sense, especially if you have several buildings within a scene. And then we'll add the edge over here. Work around the microphone to add that edge. And when things get away from you a little bit, like mine did right here, my line over here on the edge, you can just clean it up as you go, no problem. And then we'll draw lines back to the vanishing point here. Again, from all four corners. And I'm going to let those lines get a little lighter as they recede back, because I know that I'm going to end up erasing part of them anyway, so I'm not going to go too crazy with things. And I also can recognize now that I'm going to end up erasing this complete and entire line. So there's not, and the line I'm referring to is the one that goes from this corner back to the vanishing point. So there's not a real reason here to add that line, because I'm going to be erasing it. Now, the reason why I included it over here is because it's important to know the full process. And there may be circumstances where you do need that line. But for right now, we're not going to need it. So we can go ahead and define the edges here. And that means that we're not going to even be drawing this smaller square here. We're just going to be defining the edges of the building, which makes things a little bit easier. Before you can cut some corners, you need to know what corners you need to cut. So now we know that theoretically there's another line that goes back there. We can cut that step out a little bit and save some time. All right, now we can erase the lines that we no longer need. And in this case, it's just going to be those extra lines that go back to the vanishing point. All right, we will add quite a bit more to this scene, of course. But before we go on, let's talk about maybe turning these into actual buildings. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some windows and doors to this and make it look a little bit more interesting than just a couple of cubes sitting there. So let's start with the front side of the building here. And on the front side, you can see this is a rectangle. So all of the details, whether they be windows or doors here, if they're rectangular, they're going to be just basically rectangles. They're not going to have necessarily any lines that go back to the vanishing point. Now, I'm going to make this it's going to be kind of a boring building, and I'm just going to do a line of windows here. So to create that line of windows, I'm just going to create 2 lines here in which my windows are going to be, and then I'm just going to draw some lines where each one of the windows ends, and then quickly I'll fill those in and make them a little darker so that we can see that these are windows. Now I'm doing this really quick, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time adding a bunch of details here and there, because basically this is all about understanding the process of one-point perspective and how it applies to doing a number of things within a scene. Now, of course, we can erase any extra lines that might no longer be needed. And we could put some more windows on the front of this building if we wanted to. We really go crazy. Put a bunch of windows here, but that would kind of be a waste of time for what we're doing this evening. So we're going to put a door down here at the bottom. That might be important to see. So we'll let this have an entrance maybe over here to the left. So I'm just going to draw a rectangle initially here, right on the outside. Now, we don't want to just leave it like that, because that's pretty darn flat door. It's not very interesting. Most entryways into buildings go back a little bit. They're a little bit recessed. So we will use the vanishing point for that. And to do this, we're going to go from this corner, and we're going to line that corner up with the vanishing point. Now, the reason why we're going to go from this corner, not that corner, is if we drew a line up from this corner, it wouldn't make sense because it would be blocked from our view on the front side of the building. So you do have to think about your lines a little bit. Now, a good way to think about it is if you're doing a recessed area and it's on the right side of the vanishing point, then it's going to start from the right side of the square or rectangle. Same thing if it's on the left side, it will originate from the left side of that square or rectangle. So we're going to go right down here on the right side, right bottom corner, and then we're just going to make a small little line. That line, of course, is lined up with the vanishing point. So I just lined my ruler up with that vanishing point and then made a small, short, little diagonal line up. Then I'm going to draw a line straight up that is parallel to my original line. Now we're getting somewhere. This looks a little bit more like it's recessed into the building. And then from this corner, I'm just going to go straight across, right down here at the bottom. And now it's really starting to appear like you can go back into that building a little bit to enter. So I'm just going to quickly make it look like maybe it's a kind of a glass door with a kick plate at the bottom. And I'll go ahead and add some value in here so it looks like there's maybe a glass entryway. Very wide door, I know, but and then I'll just add a little bit of value here on the side that's maybe darker right underneath, and then it kind of fades out. There we go. That definitely looks a little bit more recessed, and it kind of helps create the illusion of form on the building a little bit more. Now, the front side of the building is pretty easy when it comes to adding windows and doors, pretty much straight rectangles. There's a little bit of a trick here to make it look a little bit more three-dimensional. When we're talking about windows and doors on the side, it's a little bit not difficult, it's just different. So what we're going to do is going to approach it the same way here. We drew two lines to establish where the windows were. So we're going to draw two lines on the side to establish where the windows are on the side of the building as well, except we have to follow the vanishing point. So I'm going to line my ruler up here with the vanishing point, and then I'm just going to slide it up, kind of rotate it up so that it lines up with that line that I drew on the front side of the building with the windows. Now I'm going to just take that line and go right back to the vanishing point. All right, so this is going to be the top line of our windows. Now for the bottom line of the windows, I'm going to do the same thing. Line it up with the vanishing point, and then right here at the bottom where this line comes all the way across, and the line goes up. So basically the height of our windows has got to get smaller as it recedes back in space. And the way we determine how small it gets is based on the location of the vanishing point. So we're drawing lines from each end of this back to the vanishing point. Now we can do the same thing we did with the windows on the front. We can determine where they end by drawing straight up and down vertical lines. Now this is very important because a lot of students, when they try to draw the lines on the side of the building, they'll draw diagonal lines for some reason, and I think I understand why they do that. They're thinking that these lines are diagonal. The lines that they draw need to be diagonal too for some reason to line up, but this corner right here does not need to be a right angle. Instead, there needs to be an acute angle right here and an obtuse angle down here at the bottom. So we're going to draw straight up and down lines. You have to kind of discipline yourself to draw those. Now the distance between the windows as it goes back in space is going to get a little bit shorter. So there's going to be a little bit less space. You see how this window is a little bit less wide than this window. Now to help you see it a little bit, I'll go ahead and fill it in with a darker value so that we can see those windows going back in space on the side of this really, really ultra boring building here. It is really a boring building, but that's not the point tonight. All right, now so you can see another row of windows. I'll do another one real quick right underneath this. Again, two lines back to the vanishing point to establish the top part. Might help if I actually make a line there. To establish the top part of the windows, and then another line to establish the bottom portion of the windows, and then lines to figure out where the windows begin and end. And again, these lines need to go straight up and down. All right. Now that we've got some windows and door on the front, let's add another entrance. We got to make sure this building's up to fire code, right? Or an exit. So we're going to put another door right underneath these windows, and I'll show you how that's done, how things on the side of the building might change. We're still going to make it recessed though. So let's put it close to the front here so we can really see what's going on. So right here on the edge, I'm begin by drawing first well, you know what? Let's do this. Let's determine where the top of it is first, and I'm just going to draw a line back to the vanishing point to establish the top part of the door. Now, if we want it to be the exact same size or the exact same height as this one, we can always line this up and kind of make a note of it here on the corner of the building, and then line that up with the vanishing point, and that will ensure that our door on the side and our door on the front are technically the same height. Now we can take that line back, and I could extend it all the way to the vanishing point, but I'm just going to take it back a little bit. Now this is going to be the top of our entryway, so basically that's the top right there. Then we're going to draw a line that's parallel here, to indicate where the door starts. And then we'll figure out where it ends over here on the side, or basically this is the entryway, not necessarily the door. So there we go. Now, of course, you could leave that, but that would be a very boring, flat-looking door. So instead, we need to just make a little recessed area like we did over here. Now, to do that, all we have to do is from this corner, since we've already got a line going back to the vanishing point, we don't need another one. Instead, we need to make a line that just goes straight across. Again, this is going to be a short little line. It's just going to establish the thickness of the wall there. Just straight across. And then a line that goes straight up until we run into the top of the building. Just like that. Now, from this little corner that has developed, because I drew that, we're going to need to draw a line back to the vanishing point from that corner. Just like that. Now we have created a recess that goes into the building. Now all we need to do is add the illusion of a door with a huge door with a kick plate. So we'll draw the top part of the kick plate, and this will need to go back to the vanishing point. So we'll kind of line that up, and then a line that just goes straight up. And we'll add a little bit of value in there. There we go. And then from the inside part, right underneath that door, straight down, we'll add a little bit of a gradation of value from dark to light. And now we have created another door on the side, another entryway. So thankfully our building's up to code. It's always a good thing. All right, now before we add some more details to this building, again, I want to make sure that we cover everything that I want to cover tonight. So real quickly, I want to show you how to create another building behind this one, and then we'll address creating some roads and maybe a sidewalk. Also want to do a fence, a line of trees, so on. So we've got a lot to do here. Now, let's say there is a building behind this one. How would you go about doing that? Well, we know the first thing we need to do is draw the shape of the object. So we're going to let this building be a little bit taller. Okay. Now, we don't want to bring a line that goes down beyond this building right here. That's a mistake sometimes people make. They'll bring the shape of the building down and it goes beyond where this building could logically end. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this line right here, the bottom of this building, as a guide to make sure that we don't go beyond it. So if you just kind of extend that line a little bit, or you do so in your mind, it will help you figure out where the corner of the next building needs to end. So in drawing the next shape, I'm going to bring the line down, and I'm not going to let it extend beyond this line. Then I can go straight across, and I don't have to go very far. I can decide that I want to end my line right here, but theoretically it continues on behind this building. And then we'll draw the other side of the building over here. And of course, this is the edge of the shape that's behind it. So we're imagining the rectangle behind here. And if it helps, you can go ahead and draw all that out. But as I'm progressing with this, I'm cutting some corners because we now know what the corners are. So now the top of our building, again, this is just a rectangle behind this first building that we created. Now from each of the four corners, we draw lines to the vanishing point. 1, 2, 3. Of course, I'm going to make that one very light because it's really not necessary. And then we have a fourth corner down here that's not going to affect the final form of our building. Now we can just figure out where this building ends, and we'll let this building end right about here. And in this case, we only need to draw one line because across the top we can't see the top because of the place that the viewer is at. We cannot see the top part. With these two buildings, we're kind of looking down on it from our vanishing point. As things get lower on the picture plane, we'll see more of the top. As things get further away, off in the distance, we'll see less of the top of objects. Then we can erase some lines. Now, inside of this object right here, this building, we're not going to be able to see the vanishing point through it, so we can go ahead and erase the lines there that were the line that was there for the vanishing point, or the horizon line. I can't seem to talk tonight. All these terms: vanishing point, horizon line, lines of perspective. It's easy to get all those things mixed up in your head, even though you know what you're saying. All right, these lines of perspective that extend beyond that building, we don't need those either. So we can go ahead and erase those. Now we have ensured that our second building does not drop below this building here that's closer to the viewer, and it still makes sense here as being a form in space. Now we can go back and we can add some details to this building if we have time, but the next thing I want to do is address a road. And adding a road and a sidewalk is actually easier than creating a cube or anything else that you might be adding. But in the context of these buildings that are kind of developing, it makes sense to add a road to get there. So I'm going to leave a little bit of space for an area of a sidewalk that we can add, and I'm just going to take a line back to the vanishing point and then just bring it right down into our foreground. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side here, and I know this is going to look like a road that goes on forever and ever, but it doesn't. It's got to end somewhere, right? And it's definitely a very flat terrain here that we're drawing. All right, so two lines that simply go back to the vanishing point. Now, we're going to establish our road inside of these two lines. Let's start with creating a curb. Let's say there's a sidewalk over here. We need to create a curb. Now, since our road is predominantly on the right side of the vanishing point, we're going to address a curb on the right side of the road. If our road was predominantly on the left side of the vanishing point, we would establish the edge of the curb on the left side of the road. And that's what I mean. I'm going to draw another line that goes back to the vanishing point, but it's going to be very close to the first line that I drew, and that's just going to help create the illusion that our curb has a little bit of dimension here, which will probably make more sense in just a moment. Now I'm going to draw a line right down the middle, and this is going to establish where the line that goes right down the middle, maybe a dotted line or something here. We'll just draw that very lightly, and maybe to make it a little bit thicker, we'll add another line. Let's add it on this side. And there we go. Now, in different parts of the world, they handle the lines in the middle of the road differently. I'm just going to make a dotted line here, so I'm just going to draw straight lines across. And of course, these lines need to get closer together as they go back in space. And we can erase the lines in between that we don't need anymore. There we go. All right, and there we go. We've got somewhat of a road here. Now let's add a little bit more interest to our curb over here on the right side, or our sidewalk. So I will draw another line back to the vanishing point. Now I also don't want this line to go further behind the buildings, so I'm going to bring it up right against the edge of the buildings here. And maybe I can get this to work here without moving my paper. Let's do it this way. I'm trying to contort myself to make this work for the setup I have here. Might be just easier to do that. There we go. Much easier. All right, so now we've got at least an area where our sidewalk ends. So if you ever wondered where the sidewalk ends, well, right there is a place. Now I'm going to draw just some horizontal lines that are parallel to each other, just like we did with the windows. Again, the tendency of most people is to draw lines that go like this for the sidewalk, kind of up at a diagonal. That's not correct, but I know why the desire is there to do that. You know that the squares that are, or the rectangles that make up each segment of the sidewalk have a right angle there, so the tendency is to make squares or rectangles out of the two lines that you drew back. But you got to remember, you've got to have an acute angle and an obtuse angle. Acute and obtuse for it to make sense. So in order to have that, you just got to draw the line straight across. And of course, these segments of the sidewalk, they can be as close as you want them to be, or far apart as you want them to be, but they definitely need to get closer together as they go back in space. So I'll just continue that back here without the ruler. Go a little quicker. And that is a serious sidewalk right there. That took some major concrete to create. All right, Michael's pointing out there is a line at the edge of the doorway that should be erased at the sidewalk. Yeah, probably so. You probably walk out the building and maybe they don't make a connection there at the edge. I'm not really sure. And, this line can be erased here. And I think this is the line that Michael is pointing out right here, but on the front side of the building. Yeah. So lots of little detail-y things that we could take care of and make it definitely more finished. But we're going to continue on talking about the concepts involved here. So sidewalk could continue forever. Now, before I want to add maybe possibly a sign on top of these buildings so you can kind of see how that's done. And maybe we'll have some time to add a car on the road. But before we do that, let's talk about maybe a line of trees or a fence. And I'll start here. Let's start with a line of trees. That's a pretty good approach to go. Now, how would you draw trees or people or anything that is predominantly vertical in space? Well, we'll do it kind of similar to the way we did the road. We'll start with two lines. Now, I'm going to let these trees exist behind these buildings. And so I'm going to draw first a line that will be an indicator of the bottom part of the tree. So this is the base of the trunk of the tree. Now we need to decide how tall the tree is going to be. And so we're going to go right up here. We'll let the tree be maybe about as tall as the building here, or the building in the back. So again, two more lines. So this is going to be the top of the tree, and this is going to be the bottom of the tree. Now, where the leaves of the tree start and where the trunk ends, we can also establish that too, just to be on the safe side. So let's let this be where the main part of the leaves end, where the main part of the leaves begin and the trunk ends. Actually, that's probably too high of a line, so let's bring it down a little bit. We don't want to have trees that look like they were over-groomed. All right, so let's say it's the same type of tree, and they were all planted on the same day, probably by the same worker who poured all the concrete. Poor guy. So I'm just going to establish these trees by thinking about the form of the tree. We're going to have a light source coming from the left side, so we'll have highlight on the left side and then core shadow on the right side. And so I'll just start up here at the top of the line, and I'm just going to create quickly a pattern. I'm not going to put a whole lot of effort in these trees. I'm just going to create a texture here, and don't overthink this. You can take your time if you're doing your own drawing and you really want to go through it, but for right now, if you just want to quickly add some trees, just quickly make some marks, make some texture, and really just create an illusion here. You don't have to go too crazy with things. We're just going to let the top part of the tree kind of get closer together and expand out here in the middle. And I'm just really just making squiggly lines here. and just making darker squiggly lines on the right side of the tree. We'll let some of these lines kind of extend out just a little bit. And then on the left side of the tree, same squiggly lines, just lighter pressure, so that equates to lighter value. And then down along the bottom part here, we'll get a little darker because there is a little bit more cast shadow. And then we'll bring the trunk of the tree down all the way here to the bottom of our line here. So we use the top line to establish where the top of the tree is, the middle line to establish where the leaves turned into trunk, and then we'll just quickly draw in the trunk of the tree. All right, now we'll add another tree right here. And again, we're going to use the top line to indicate where the top of the tree is. And then we don't have to worry about making our tree too short or too tall, because they're all planted on the same day by the same guy or gal. And then of course we're going to have a darker side and a lighter side. Let a few of these leaves kind of extend out, and then when we get down here to this line, we know it's time to turn our tree from leaf or leaves into trunk. And there we go. And again, our trunk will have a dark side and a light side, and we'll extend all the way down to the bottom. So you can kind of see already how that's kind of aiding in the illusion of space here. And you know what? That's the ultimate goal in using linear perspective. One of the 6 ways to create the illusion of space on a 2-dimensional surface. We'll add just another couple quick trees here. So the dark side, just quick texture. Don't overthink it. And the nice thing is when trees get further away, they get less detailed, just like everything else. So less detail, less indication of those leaves. All right, and then the trunk. So we're down here at this line. Dark side of the trunk, light side of the trunk. And we'll put one more behind the building because we only got to do just the tip of it. We could keep going all the way back. In fact, let's just add one way off here in the distance, and we're still using those 2 lines as a guide, or actually 3 lines. Top of the tree, middle of the tree, and there we go. So now we've created the illusion of space using 1-point perspective, this time with trees. Quickly, I'll erase the lines that we used here because we don't want our fence that we're going to add next. Fence is really easy compared to these trees. We don't want those lines to be confusing here. All right. Now let's say there is a fence behind this line of trees, and again, this is very easy to do. We're going to start with 2 lines. We're going to establish first where the bottom of the fence is going to be, and we'll just let that line come right through here. I'm not going to draw over the top of the trees, and of course this goes on forever back here, so we'll extend it back here. All right, now the top part of our fence, and again, that's just going to be another line. We need to decide how tall we want that fence to be. And we'll make it about this tall. We'll see how that looks. So just like when we did the trees and the leaves on the trees. We've got the top part of the fence. We've got the bottom part of the fence. I'm actually going to switch over to a sharper pencil now. That one's getting pretty darn dull. Now, of course, you could make a really ugly, nasty chain link fence, but that's no fun. So we're going to make just a fence that has some fence posts. So I'm going to draw straight up and down vertical lines for each place where each location of the fence post. And let's say there's one right here too. Now you can use the ruler for this, but I'm just going to Just going to freehand it here, make it look a little bit more natural. So I'm just going to periodically put a fence post that, of course, need to get a little closer together as they go back in space. And I hope the same person who planted these trees and created that sidewalk there did not have to create this fence here. It would be terrible. So now we can go back, and if we want to, we can put some fence posts here, or actually the planks of the fence, and it can be any type of fence that you want. You can turn this into anything. That's when the creativity should come in and play a role. But just real quickly, I'm going to draw vertical lines to indicate where the fence ends. All right. Now, to further the illusion of space just a little bit off in the distance, I'm just going to create somewhat of a little bit of a mountain range here off beyond the horizon line. And at least somewhere off in the distance it becomes less flat. And then I'm going to quickly just add a little bit of value, just a quick scribble here and there, just to make it stand out a little bit more as being different. Different in value. And let's see, real quickly, told you I wanted to add a car here. Real quickly, I'm going to add a really quick car. So we'll see how it turns out. But I'm going to kind of basically carve that car, or put that car within a box. So I'm going to start by drawing a rectangle, just like we did with the buildings. And this car is going to fit within this rectangle. So it's almost like you've got a block of wood and you need to carve the car out of the block of wood. So the first thing we need to do is create the block of wood. So after I've got that initial rectangle, I'll create lines that go back to the vanishing point from all four corners. In this case, I will do all four corners. All right, now we need to draw another box that's just further back in space. That touches all of those lines that we drew back, if I can see all the lines. Once you start getting a bunch of lines on here, it is easy to get confused. And there we go. Okay, so now basically we've got a box here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to carve the car out of the box here. So we'll start with maybe some wheel hubs. And I'm not looking at a car or anything, I'm just making the sucker up. So we'll see how it turns out. And then maybe the front of the car here, we've got, maybe put a headlight right here, another headlight right there. And of course I'm using this box as kind of a guide to figure out where everything goes. It can be a little looser and organic here. Doesn't have to be perfect, in other words. And we'll let this be a convertible car. So we'll let the top of the convertible be right here. And then maybe we've got the windshield that comes across here. We'll add quickly a little side mirror on both sides, and then the seating there, and then the back edge of the car. So you're basically just carving it out of the rectangular prism there that you've created. A little bit of a dashboard, maybe a steering wheel over here. And yes, I know this person is driving on the wrong side of the road. If you're here in the United States, maybe this is a one-way street. Let's pretend it's a one-way street. I'll add a couple wheels here on the side, just straight up ovals, and make those tires a little bit dark, and then maybe a little bit of cast shadow underneath that car. Now, speaking of cast shadow, let's take this just a little bit further with our buildings and everything else. And I quickly got a car on there anyway. If you're struggling with the shape of a car and it's giving you a little bit of grief, start with something a little bit easier like a bus or maybe a tractor trailer or something like that. Something that's a little bit squarish. That makes it a little bit easier than having to do those organic shapes in there. Yeah, I know. I know, Doug. Yeah, and the car is pretty big compared to the buildings. Yeah, there are all kinds of proportional issues here. But just real quickly, at least you can kind of see how you can carve out the car. It's definitely not England though, because the steering wheel is on the left side of the car. But you know what? It does look a lot like a British car. It does look like maybe a Triumph Spitfire a little bit. Anyway, and yeah, the proportions are off a little bit, so you want to make sure that that's correct. Maybe this building is for really, really small people. So the last thing, let's add a little bit of cast shadow to this so that we create a little bit of light. Now our light source is, let's say, coming from this side, from the left side, and coming across the page like this. We can do a couple of things. We can create shadow coming from each one of the edges here at an angle and keeping that angle consistent, or we can just let those shadows come straight across sideways. So for this, I'm just going to let these shadows come straight across. So we're just going to drop some cast shadow here behind the building, and of course it's going to be darker the closer it is to the building, and it's going to fade out and get lighter as it extends from the building. And again, this is real quick, straight out from the edge there. And of course there'll be some cast shadow behind the trees. Maybe it's hitting the fence and bouncing up here, and there's some more behind this tree, and then some more behind that one. And we'll put a little bit of that cast shadow on that fence. And of course this building that no one can get into or no one can look out of because there are no windows and no doors on here. We'll quickly add a little bit of shadow here too. And depending on what time of day it is, those cast shadows are going to be longer or shorter, and the way we're adding the shadow here, it's definitely going to look like it's getting close to the end of the day. Another thing to point out, there's no one driving the car. That might be strange. So yes, there are some definite problems with this thing here, but that's okay. All right, I think that's probably enough here. So I think you guys kind of get the idea here. You can keep going. You can keep building on this. And one of the great things about one-point perspective is, you can kind of make things up as you go along. You can be really creative. You can add things as long as you know the basic rules of starting with that horizon line, adding the vanishing point, and then drawing the basic shape, lines back to the vanishing point, and then drawing a smaller version of the shape, in this case a smaller square, and then just erasing lines. You don't need any more. It makes it pretty easy, and actually can be pretty fun building up things as you go. So we'll switch back over here. So I hope you guys were able to pick up a few things tonight. Remember, one-point perspective was, I guess, discovered by Filippo Brunelleschi, the Italian architect. Next week, we're going to be going a little deeper with linear perspective, and we're going to be talking about two-point perspective. When it comes to perspective, two-point perspective and three-point perspective, it's a little bit more exciting, a little bit less static looking, I guess. So a little bit more dynamic. Hopefully you'll be able to join me next week for that lesson. As always, thank you guys for being a part of the virtualinstructor.com, and thanks for sharing your Wednesday evening with me. I hope you guys have a great week. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for this evening.